welcome to the Soho Forum. Thank you. Tonight's resolution reads, government-run child protective services should intervene more in the lives of children. Here to defend the resolution, Naomi Riley. Naomi, please take the stage. Here to oppose the resolution, Martin Guggenheim. Martin, please take the stage. That's what I like about a debate in front of a live audience. A very rowdy crowd. So the air is already electric, and here, of course, the affirmative always goes first. Naomi, 15 minutes to defend the resolution. I think you want to take the podium. Take it away, Naomi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, Gene. I know you already said that you may not have expected such a big crowd for this topic, but I really appreciate that you are willing to humor this. I think it's a really important topic, and thank you all for coming tonight. I think that one of the reasons that child welfare is often overlooked is that, frankly, few members of the public have the stomach to read about the tragedies that occur in this world every day. Sure. That's good? Okay. So I hope you won't mind if I ask for your patience while I tell you about one of them tonight. On October 13th, 2024, 4-year-old Jamaic Moden was found emaciated with his 3 severely malnourished older siblings, ages 5, 6, and 7, in the Harlem apartment that they shared with their mother and Jamaica's father. Jamaic was pronounced dead the next morning. Doctors said his hair was matted with feces. He had been eating his own vomit for weeks. His father said he didn't notice because he was playing video games. All the while, there was a fully stocked refrigerator in the home, but it was turned to face the wall so that none of the small, desperate children in the apartment could access it. New York City's Administration for Children's Services had been aware of the problems with Jamaica's family since at least 2019. But in 2022, ACS closed the case, determining that the family was not in need of any intervention. Jamaica is one of more than 2,000 children who die by abuse and neglect each year. It's a number that most experts and the federal government say is probably an underestimate, and it has been rising in recent years. Most of these deaths, I want to tell you, are preventable. The majority of these families were reported to authorities before the fatality occurred. If Child Protective Services had intervened more aggressively, these children would still be alive, and tens of thousands of other children who are being severely abused and chronically neglected would be protected from the harms being perpetrated by their caregivers. Child fatalities, I want to tell you, are not needles in the haystack, as some would have you believe. There are more child fatalities from abuse and neglect than from backyard drownings, childhood cancer, and even school shootings. Child maltreatment fatalities, in fact, are the tip of the iceberg. There are tens of thousands of cases of abuse and neglect that are reported to authorities, but the public does not notice because those children don't turn up dead. And so their cases are not subject to the same kind of public scrutiny. To be clear, and let me define our terms here, government does not need to intervene in the lives of more children. It needs to intervene more in the lives of children who are already being reported for abuse and neglect. There are about 4 million reports of child maltreatment coming in each year, which involve over 7 million children. The majority of those reports are screened out, meaning that we don't investigate them at all. The majority of the investigations we do engage in are inconclusive. And even when we know something, we offer those families services like parenting classes, anger management, or drug rehabilitation. There were approximately 171,000 entries into foster care in 2024. In other words, only about 2% of abuse and neglect reports wind up with a child being removed to foster care. The number of kids in foster care overall, about 330,000, has been declining for the past several years. The reason for this is not that fewer children are being abused and neglected. There are actually more reports coming in. And now, thanks to the opioid crisis, that has been increasing for several years. But because of ideological pressure that has been placed on child welfare agencies, we are leaving more children in unsafe situations. There are 3 myths that I argue are driving this shift. First is the idea that child welfare agencies are systematically racist and that Black families in particular are being unnecessarily separated. Answering this requires us to understand how much more risk Black children face compared to white children. In 2019, Black children experienced known risk factors for maltreatment. Those included poverty, single-parent households, teen parents, poor education, at between 2 and 3 times the rate that white children did. Black families also experienced, unfortunately, negative outcomes such as very low birth weight and preterm birth at rates that were also between 2 and 3 times those of white children. Black children are 3 times as likely to die from maltreatment as their white peers. Despite this, Black children are reported to Child Protective Services at less than twice the rate that white children are, about 1.8 times as often. Seen in this context, it appears that Black children are not overreported to CPS at all. They may actually be underreported. And once reported, Black children are actually less likely to be removed to foster care than their white peers. The second myth driving this discussion is that families involved in child welfare don't need surveillance or intervention. Instead, families need financial resources. Proponents of this idea point to 2 facts. First, that families involved with the child welfare system are disproportionately poor, and second, that most children who are investigated by CPS and most children who are removed to foster care are suffering from neglect, not abuse. So what is neglect? Is it just poverty, as these proponents suggest? First, up to 90% of families involved with the child welfare system are suffering from some kind of substance use disorder. 90%. That's according to Casey Family Programs. Many of these families are also dealing with untreated mental illness. The public is all too familiar with adults who are on our streets and in subways struggling with serious mental illness and addiction, and it is worth noting that some of these folks are unfortunately also trying to care for young children. In some cities, there are children living in homeless encampments. Authorities know about it and are doing nothing. A 9-year-old was recently reported as living in a tent with his mother in Seattle. He is told to go wait in the bushes while she entertains Johns. He has never been to school, and he does not have access to running water. But CPS will not get involved because they don't believe he is, quote, at imminent risk of physical harm. A caseworker who recently called CPS about a toddler living in a homeless encampment in Portland while his mother was nodding off from fentanyl was told, this is a homeless outreach worker, was told when he called CPS that, quote, poverty is not a crime, so CPS would not be showing up. Reports show that neglect includes very young children left alone, unsafely supervised due to parental intoxication or serious mental illness, or in the care of other dangerous adults, exposed to domestic violence, or living in dangerously unsanitary conditions due to lack of parental upkeep. Perhaps not surprisingly, large-scale longitudinal studies show that children reported for neglect not only have worse outcomes in terms of high school graduation, likelihood of incarceration, teen pregnancy, and addiction than their merely impoverished peers, they actually have worse outcomes than kids reported for physical abuse. Let me repeat that. The kids who are reported for neglect have worse outcomes than the kids who are reported for abuse. It is true that many of the families who are caught up in the child welfare system are poor, but most are already receiving benefits, including Medicaid and food assistance. But the same things that prevent parents from maintaining employment or housing, especially substance abuse and mental illness, often inhibit them, from engaging in services while also diminishing their ability to protect and care for their children. Poverty is not the cause of maltreatment. Millions of poor people in this country do not mistreat their children. Poverty is another effect of parental incapacity. So what should we do about these kids who are in danger? What kinds of interventions are necessary? The first step is making sure that they are being reported to authorities. Opponents of child welfare have taken to calling it a, quote, family surveillance system. Let me tell you some things about this system. A third of all victims are 3 years old or under. Half of all removals to foster care are for kids who have not yet entered kindergarten. 2/3 of child fatalities are among kids younger than 3 years, and close to half are infants. The commonly repeated idea that children are regularly investigated, let alone removed from their parents, because they're fourth graders walking to parks by themselves is simply wrong. The kids who are most in danger are young, very young. They are also disproportionately disabled and often even nonverbal. They have no means of telling other adults or protecting themselves when things in their home are going horribly wrong. How else but by some kind of surveillance are we going to protect them? The recent trend to discourage reporting to CPS by doctors, teachers, and even neighbors and relatives, with warnings that such reports inevitably lead to separation and greater harm to families, is dangerous and wrong. It has now gotten to the point where hospitals are not reporting substance exposure in infants to Child Protective Services. Instead, we are sending mothers with active addiction home with infants and no support. Since adopting this policy a couple of years ago, New Mexico has seen at least one of these infants die each month as a result of parental abuse or neglect in the weeks or months after leaving the hospital. Some of these children are ingesting fentanyl. Others are suffocating when their intoxicated parents roll over on them. We don't need to remove every one of these infants when they test positive for drugs, but we do need to make sure that someone from CPS is following up to make sure that there are other adults who are sober and responsible in the home and that the mother is engaged in some kind of rehabilitation. It is hard enough to care for an infant. Doing so while you are high and your child is medically fragile is all but impossible. So what other interventions are possible? Unfortunately, many of the support services offered to families in crisis are not very effective, particularly when they involve substance use. As anyone who's had a relative suffering from addiction knows, it can take multiple attempts and years of effort to get the problem under control, and often sobriety is never achieved. In some of these instances, foster care is the only solution, which leads me to the third myth, that foster care is itself what harms children. It is hard to separate the effects of foster care from the years of abuse and neglect that often precede it. Moreover, many of the studies about the harms of foster care were done of young children placed in institutional settings, something that we almost never do in America today. Young children are almost invariably placed in family environments, and while there are reports of mistreatment in foster families, there are lower rates of abuse and neglect in those families than in the general population. The most recent large-scale study of foster care was published in 2022 in the National Bureau of Economic Research. It finds that foster care is not the problem, it is a real solution. Looking at 120,000 child welfare investigations involving kids in Michigan between the ages of 6 and 16 from 2008 to 2016, it found that for kids who were on the threshold of being taken into care or being left in their homes with services, foster care reduced the likelihood of criminal involvement by 25 percentage points. The decline was driven by a significant reduction in violent crime in particular. So why is it that kids in foster care end up doing better than those who have been abused and neglected but left in their homes? For one thing, the authors found a lower likelihood that those in foster care would suffer maltreatment again by the families that originally abused them. This held true even after they left foster care and after they were reunited with their families, as most of them were. If maltreatment leads to more trauma and more behavioral problems, then less maltreatment leads to fewer behavioral problems and less criminal activity. Similarly, the authors found that there were better academic outcomes among kids who had spent time in foster care, including the likelihood of high school graduation. A 2021 study found that among infants reported for maltreatment, periods of foster care placement reduced the likelihood of death by half. Again, these are the youngest children at high risk, often suffering from the effects of their parental incapacity. They have no voice and no ability to escape without government intervention. The removal of children in order to incentivize a change in parental behavior can seem heartless, but getting off of drugs is hard. Those who do voluntarily enter treatment usually don't complete it, and up to 80% leave by the end of the first year. No one, not least of all those of us who distrust big government, want to believe that more government intervention is the best solution for kids. But the truth is that there are parents that, because of untreated mental illness or active addiction, cannot be trusted to care for young children. And we need to keep a careful watch on these parents and in some cases remove their children. For at least some adults, the removal of children to foster care will give them the necessary push to get help and become the parents their kids actually need. In short, if we want to protect children and help parents who are abusing or neglecting them, the answer is more intervention, not less. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Naomi. Just again, to those in the audience who've apparently registering strong reactions to this debate, I think that's great. Please recognize that that's what the Q&A session is for, and that both debaters are coming to an after party. So please, thanks for clapping about that. So please be attentive and respectful to both debaters. You too will soon have your say. Martin, excuse me. Excuse me. Again, if you want, the rules of our debate are, if you want to cheer, clap, or boo, you can do it. But please do not utter any words in any language. Martin Guggenheim, I don't want to hear words, just noises whenever you feel like making such noises, boos, cheers, or applause. Martin Guggenheim, nobody's booing, nobody's applauding, and
Well,
Martin will be running for office soon. Take it away. Take it away, Martin.
So-
5 minutes, 15 minutes. Go ahead.
thank you. And I'm very glad to be here and to have this opportunity to parry with someone who has written things for decades with which I am in almost total disagreement. I'll try tonight to explain the thoroughness of that disagreement. This is an unusual experience for me on several levels.
Well, because everybody here, Martin, okay? Yeah, okay. In the back, I mean? Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
First, I'm unsure whether, if ever, I've formally participated in a debate before. Second, I can't recall another occasion when I was asked to speak about our child welfare system when the room was not filled exclusively with people who work in it. I'm aware that many here tonight know a great deal about this system, but I know there are also many who know almost nothing about it. To those of you, I want to begin by telling you things that you will find shocking. So shocking, you might not even believe me. All I can say is, I wish what I'm about to tell you was made up. The United States child welfare system is completely financed by federal financing. It directs billions of federal dollars to state agencies to remove children from their families. It pays significant subsidies to foster parents, adoptive parents, and guardians. And it does all of this without funding state efforts to provide parents with financial support and services that could prevent family separations and reunify families. Federal funding laws make it cheaper for states to separate families and place children in state custody, and offers significant financial incentives to states to permanently sever the legal relationships between children and parents. Now, this funding is an open spigot. There's no limit on how many families an agency can separate and still trigger federal money. The more families a state separates, the more federal dollars it receives. The more families it destroys, the more money it gets. Now, there's a catch here. States may receive federal funds only when they separate children from parents who would otherwise receive public benefits. They have no incentive of any kind to remove children from families that are ineligible for public benefit assistance. Unsurprisingly, almost all children in foster care in the United States were born into families in poverty. Many states routinely destroy the legal relationship between a parent and her child merely because the parent failed to complete a program an agency required of the parent, even when the program has no openings. The system operates, in the words of a former head of the federal agency overseeing the system, quote, as a modern-day orphan train that leads to the distribution of other people's children. I hope some shocks have already been felt, but now you need to hold on to your hats. Nearly 500,000 children were removed from their homes in the United States last year. More than 9 million children have been separated from their families in the past 20 years. And worst of all, the system has been responsible for permanently destroying families at a world outlying rate. More than 2 million families have been permanently destroyed by the system in this century alone. More than 50,000 families destroyed in New York alone. And every year, the system sends out into the world 20,000 legal orphans. Children who spent their childhood in the state's care after their parents' rights had been terminated, but who were never adopted by anyone. So that's the overall picture of this country's so-called child welfare system. How, you might wonder, could this be true if you don't know about it? Because you're wealthy. And people who live in wealthy communities haven't a clue what local government does to families that live in racially segregated, impoverished communities. This system only targets those communities. The reason they don't talk about taking kids who walk to the park unattended, these kids don't live where there are parks. The stark racialization of this system is breathtaking and heartbreaking. The child welfare field is the most important civil rights field nobody knows. In New York City, more than 40% of black and brown children are investigated before they turn 18. I lost my sentence, sorry. They account for 90% of the children in the system. More than half of black American children experience a family regulation investigation during their childhood. 1 in every 41 black families in this country are legally extinguished each year. For Native American children, it's 1 in 37. In the worst places in the country, these numbers are low. Children living in the United States are 3 times more likely to have their parents' rights terminated than to contract cancer, the leading cause of death by disease of children. A black child is more than 7 times more likely. In any given year, at least 9 times more children will have their rights to their parents terminated than will lose their lives in automobile accidents. Now, I've been referring to this system as the child welfare system. I do so even though it is nothing of the kind, as I aim to show in a moment. But my opponent commonly makes fun of advocates who speak in what she calls woke language. And the terms my allies give to this system, including the family regulation system or the family police system, are far more apt. But even though they are, I will allow the convention tonight of using the same taxonomy as my opponent. Nonetheless, that raises the question, is it a child welfare system? And does it have the right to be so called? And if I disagree with much of what I heard tonight, and I'm not sure I heard anything with which I don't, we haven't even begun. So let's consider the question whether this system has the right to be called what my distinguished opponent tonight refers to it as. So what are the leading public health risks children face? The odds of a child dying before 18 are far higher in the United States than in any other high-income country, and in some instances, even higher than all other high-income countries anywhere. Are killers? What, guys? Guns! 20% of children's deaths are from guns. The odds that a child will be killed by a gun is 36 times higher in the United States than in other high-income countries. It's 12 times higher than in the 25 richest countries combined. The politicians love the American Enterprise Institute and Naomi Schaefer Riley because they make it easy for them to get a pass. This subject is deeply political. They're turning your eyes away from reality. America's child welfare system has carved out from its portfolio all of the systemic harms children are subject to that are the consequence of powerful lobbying interests or the government itself. Unsanitary streets, inadequate nutrition, universal health care. And what about maternal mortality? John Bowlby taught me that if a community loves its children, it must cherish their parents. Black women are at least 3 times as likely as white women to die from pregnancy-related causes. Women of color have higher rates than white women of preterm births, low birth weight births, and late or no prenatal care. We have always had racial disparities, but they are considerably worse today. In 1920, black women giving birth died at only twice the rate of white women. Today, it's 3.5 times. Let's pay serious attention to that. Since 1974, when this country created the current version of its child welfare system, the mortality rate of women of color has significantly gotten worse. Oh, those kids don't need moms. They're just those kids. They're not my kids. We rank 50th in the world for maternal mortality. If black women began to die from pregnancy-related causes as infrequently as white women, our mortality rates would equal the rest of the developed world's. Racial disparities abound across measures of infant health. The infant mortality rate for black babies is more than twice that of white babies. Chronic conditions such as asthma, heart disease, a range of cancers disproportionately affect black children and other children of color. There's a straightforward explanation for these disparities: the inability of mothers living in poverty to secure adequate health care. Many of these deaths, especially those that are caused by infection, blood clots, and hemorrhage, occur some period of time after the woman has delivered her baby. But the mothers who live in the communities ravaged by the child welfare system lack access to quality health care after their infants are born. Most health care plans only cover a single visit to a health care provider about 6 weeks after birth. That's her fault. Because she doesn't allow us to consider the human right of a black child to have her mother survive the birth. However ignorant wealthy Americans may be regarding the ravaging of poor communities by the child welfare system, they are keenly aware of the astonishing disparate healthcare systems we accept as reasonable. I can't think of a wealthy person I've met who would choose to allow anyone they love to go to certain hospitals for their health care. We know all too well that large segments of Americans are relegated to inferior health care. That's not a child welfare question. As Kiara Bridges reports, had black mothers delivered in the same hospitals as white women, the maternal morbidity rate would have declined by about 50%. What does this have to do with tonight's debate? Everything. Our very policies chase women from seeking help and from being honest about their lives. We chase struggling women from parents from seeking help because they're frightened by the prospect of losing their children to the state. We ignore this issue because so many so-called child advocates work so hard to tell us that parents are the most dangerous thing in their child's lives. A real child welfare system would surely pay careful attention to the health needs of pregnant women. The conditions in which the families targeted by this system live are the consequences of laws, policies, and practices, such as redlining and zoning laws, as well as sites chosen by federal and local governments to deposit garbage, carcinogens, asthma-inducing conditions, food insecurity, that children Ms. Schaefer-Riley wants government to remove from their communities do indeed live in dangerous communities. They do indeed live in communities that are unfit for children, as well as adults. And that will kill people, shorten their lifespan, expose them to risk of cancer, asthma, and other dangerous conditions. We have purposefully segregated children of color into neighborhoods with substandard housing stock, environmental pollutants, a lack of green space, fresh foods, adequate medical care. It's bad enough to live in this country. I surely want to join forces with others who are outraged as I am. It's not just that we separate children from their families unlike any other country. We ignore massive problems that we could fix. I'm out of time. May I take another minute?
Yes.
A genuine child welfare system would condemn the practices that are accepted by politicians in this country. It would insist that pregnant women have access to the best medical care possible. It would count maternal health as a signal feature of any system. But the children who are born into the families that my opponent is calling for their removal are being denied a fundamental birthright. Yet the government on which she would rely to rescue children from the conditions of their birth is directly responsible for creating, maintaining, and even exacerbating those conditions. How much have we diverted attention, money, professional resources away from what we need to be doing to dig in so deeply to what we don't need to be doing? Thank you.
Naomi, you get an extra minute for rebuttal in order to even out the minutes.
Okay.
So 6 minutes of rebuttal. Take it away, Naomi.
Thank you so much. So I just want to start by reminding everyone about what the proposition is that we're debating tonight. It's about child protective services and whether child protective services should intervene more in the lives of children who have been abused and neglected. So there are a lot of systems that my opponent objects to in this country, and a lot of systems that he finds to be lacking. And I think that there are a lot of legitimate complaints about many of the systems in this country. Our healthcare system, our school systems, many of these systems are unfairly administered and produce problems more likely in some communities than others. But what we are talking tonight about is child protective services, which is sort of the ambulance in this analogy. So what we have here is a situation. I would guess I would start, maybe this will surprise my opponent, but I actually don't mind the term family policing system because I actually think that the police in this country serve a legitimate purpose. There are people who may not like the police, who may think that they don't do their job as well as they should. But ultimately, I think most Americans agree, of all races, agree that it is important for us to have some kind of force in this country that protects people when violence is perpetrated against them. And I think that the police serve that function in some ways, and Child Protective Services also serves that function. My opponent talked about how child welfare should be the #1 civil rights issue in this country. And I don't disagree with that. What I'm surprised by is that my opponent seems to not want to talk about dead black children. To me, the civil rights issue in this country is that there are more than 2,000 children who die each year of maltreatment fatalities, of abuse and neglect. They are ingesting drugs. They are being beaten. They are being denied medical care. They are being left alone for days at a time. They are not being taken to the hospital when they need to be. They are being left in the care of unsafe, dangerous adults. And so the question is, what are we going to do to protect them? There is an agency in this country that is supposed to do that. That is Child Protective Services. And I have yet to understand what my opponent proposes to do to protect those children. Not only the children who are dying, but all the children that we're not seeing, who are being abused and neglected to the point of near fatalities, or who are being abused and neglected for years and we never find out what's really going on because we're not responding. I wanted to also talk about some of the numbers that my opponent offered. He mentioned that he thinks 500,000 children were taken into foster care last year. I don't know where that number comes from. As I mentioned in my speech, there were 171,000 children taken into foster care in 2024, so 500,000 seems like a lot more than that, but my numbers come from the federal government. Maybe his numbers come from someplace else. But I guess my ultimate question really is, when we consider all of the risks that children in certain communities face in this country, as my opponent mentioned, and I mentioned too, by the way, higher rates of preterm birth, higher rates of family violence. It is not uncommon to hear people complain about how there are higher rates of domestic violence that are perpetrated on black women in this country. It is not surprising then to find that black children are being abused and neglected at higher rates than white children. But for some reason, we can't have that discussion. If we are truly interested in protecting the civil rights of everyone in this country and truly protecting people who are in danger, we need to have a conversation about the racial disproportionality of maltreatment rates in this country and of maltreatment deaths in this country. My opponent talked in particular about rates of maltreatment deaths in New York City, where we are tonight. 75% of those deaths are of black children. What are we doing to protect those children? If you don't like the idea of child protective services, I ask my opponent, what is his plan? What should CPS do instead? I think that they need to intervene more. There are many other things that we could do to improve the lives of families, but there are children being abused and neglected and killed every single day. And I think that it is the role of CPS to respond when reports are made by doctors and teachers and neighbors and their own extended family members, to respond in such a way as to protect these children so that they can go on to lead good lives.
You guys are certainly taking the prize for a lively audience, which is, of course, what I said I love to witness. 5 minutes to rebuttal, Martin.
Okay, so the question before us is, how could we trust the state to take custody of children given its record? State, local, and federal governments purposefully endanger children every day. They make them live in unhealthy communities. Those communities aren't unhealthy by accident. It's planned. They inhale dirty and contaminated water. They live with lead paint. They drink water contaminated with lead. Poison. When the state poisons children, my opponent is silent. More shockingly, she calls on those killers to take these children. This is done deliberately. State officials, school superintendents in Newark, in New York City, in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in virtually every city that contains concentrated black residents, they doctor the records of lead levels so that children can be poisoned without the government knowing until they got caught. Where's your article on that? You trust them? In those communities, children suffer real, irreversible harm. They'll die younger. They'll live unhealthier lives. They will fail to reach their potential. I believe in children's rights. The one thing that stands out about my opponent's record is how content she appears to be with our government choices, except when new regulations place obstacles into removing children. Your record is impeccable in failing to ask, what are the unacceptable things happening to children living in poverty that the government is responsible for and that the government could solve? I have too many doubts about your advocacy to call you a partner of mine in my pursuit of greater child well-being. And I ask the audience to judge us on that metric. Are you the genuine advocate for improving the lives of the families you advocate so strongly to control, or am I? What I know, I want desperately to see the issues that are genuinely harmful to children. I desperately want to reach them. Your silence about them is deafening. The richest country in the world purposefully relegates children to suffer the multiple disadvantages of living in poverty. Not too long ago, the infant mortality rate in Carnegie Hill in Manhattan was 7 in 1,000, among the lowest on earth. 3 miles away, 28 per 1,000. Higher than many third world countries. That's New York City. That's the America we need to pay attention to. Asthma, an incurable condition, affects 1 in 15 children in the United States. Overall, black children account for as much as 33% of all hospitalizations. This country stands alone in the world of wealthy countries in its refusal to take known steps to ensure child well-being. We rank 39th of 40th in family cash benefits. We give parents with 2 children $418 a month. We rank 39th out of 40th on most metrics that are kept by world leaders for the Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation. We are 4th from bottom, is one of our best rankings. What I want to clarify is not how miserably we behave as a nation, as a wealthy nation, compared with any other nation we otherwise want to be compared with. I want to clarify what we've done to hide our misdeeds and why and how the so-called child welfare system fits into that picture. The largest growth in the United States among members of the homeless population is black communities. The United States also has the highest rates of child hunger and malnutrition of all Western industrial nations. The average white family in today's United States earns 6.5 times wealthier. I'm again out, if I can take one more minute. No?
Okay.
The wealthiest 10% of Americans hold 3/4 of our wealth. The wealthiest quintile hold about 90%. The bottom half, 2%. 80% of black wealth is in the hands of the top 20%. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to appreciate that among the reasons we don't have a robust Norwegian-style social democratic welfare state in which all children have access to generous preschool and early childhood programming is because of who we are as Americans. We need to look in the mirror. We need to find disgust in ourselves. We can't imagine an American society committed to a vision in which no children grow up in poverty because we are bound to our racialized past that is so deeply rooted in our culture that it goes so far as to even prevent us from reimagining.
Thank you. Before we put it open to questions, I have just one moderator's prerogative question, which I want to put to Martin and then have Naomi come in on. I just was wrestling with this paradox. Did I hear you say, Martin, that the racial gap in 1920 was not nearly as wide as it is today? Whoever is doing that is not the kind of noise. Oh, yeah. Okay. We've had it. Racial gap was narrow in 1920, and yet we had, I guess he left the White House in January 1920, the most racist president we've ever had, Woodrow Wilson. So lynchings were tolerated, and yet it was better. How could it have been better in 1920 and worse today? Yeah, go ahead, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No? Hello? Yeah.
So it wasn't better. The disparity.
No, the disparity was narrower. How could the disparity be narrower?
Because
when
white women were dying then too, because our healthcare system improved. The maternal mortality rate between 1920 and 2020 dropped significantly for white women, but not for black women. Because black women have to go to those hospitals, and because they don't have health care to pay for it, they die. And because they were born with asthma, because they live in concentrated, dangerous communities.
I'm sorry, you're talking about 1920?
No, 2020.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In 1920, white women died
Okay.
at a horrible rate.
Oh, I see.
And now we have hospitals that care for white women, but we don't have care for black women.
Okay, so that's why we had rampant racism, lynchings tolerated, but the gap was narrow. Okay. Any comment from you, Naomi, on that at all? Or do you want to just...
It's not that, it's that white women died too often.
Okay.
So it was as bad as being a black woman then.
I hear you. Okay. Yes. Only if you want to comment. Only... God, please. Yeah.
Is my mic working? There you go. Okay. There were actually the similarities between black families and white families were black families and white families were much more similar in 1920. They married at the same rate, and if you want to understand more about the gaps in child maltreatment today, you should understand that a child who is growing up in a home with a non-relative male, that is a mother's boyfriend or a stepbrother or anything like that, is 10 times as likely to be abused as a child who is growing up with two biological parents. Those are statistics. You can find them from the federal government. Black families are much more likely to have a structure where there is a mother living with a non-relative male. Those are the facts.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question. And then otherwise, again, to both sides, Naomi, Martin, you have at any time the option of asking the other side one question. You can exercise that option now, or we can line up for questions. Either of you want to ask a question of each other now, or do you want to exercise that option possibly later? Martin? Naomi. Okay, so we have a microphone over there, and I trust that many of the people who were cheering would like to. Okay, we are going to get to the questions. Please don't bother to identify yourself. We don't care. We just want to hear. We just want to hear your question phrased as a question. Sir, what's your question?
My question's for Naomi. Addressing what I thought was going to be more of the topic on child protective services, what safeguards are taken to prevent ideologies, whether from the right or from the left, from inflicting or interfering on what is considered abuse or neglect? I can give examples, but I guess you know what I mean.
Every state has their own laws and statutes about what constitutes child abuse and neglect. For some, it's imminent physical harm. For some, it's sort of further away from that. Abuse definitions are usually more obvious to people, but neglect definitions can include anything from medical neglect, like children who have, let's say, diabetes and their parents are refusing to give them insulin or take them to the doctor when they need to be. But they can also include leaving a child with an adult who is dangerous, and if that dangerous adult abuses the child. In terms of what prevents ideology from infecting, nothing. In fact, I believe our child welfare agencies are infected with an ideology right now that is working to keep children in dangerous families.
Comment from you, Martin, on the question?
So let me give you a story to give you the picture. So my daughter broke her collarbone in 2 successive years when she was 4 and 5 or 3 and 4. I took her to the same hospital both times. My heart wasn't racing. They asked me what happened.
More in front of your mouth. Go ahead. Yeah.
I explained that she fell off a teeter-totter in the playground. They treated her and sent her home. My client does the same thing, and they come to her home and they investigate. They don't believe her. They go into her home and they find some joints on her night table, like they would have if they came to mine. And now they take my daughter out of my home. And the only reason I didn't lose my daughter is because I'm a white privileged man and they leave me alone.
Next question, sir.
So this is to the affirmative, the woman in the blue. So I don't remember your name.
Naomi.
Naomi. Are there ever times when you would think that in a neglectful environment where the child may be physically safe and you would normally take them away? Do you ever think there may be circumstances that are so sort of complex that it might make more sense to leave the child with the family? I mean, do you think that kind of like agency should be provided, or do you think there should be very firm rules that say, these are the rules, we take the child in these circumstances and we don't consider context or nuance?
I think that would be tremendously unfair to workers in these agencies who are constantly asked to make judgment calls about what constitutes a situation where a child needs to be removed. And as I said, 2% of the cases involve removal. The vast majority of the cases, we are either providing services to families in different ways, or we are just closing the case. So I would say, yes, you always have to take into account context. These are very complicated judgment calls. The agencies will make mistakes on both sides. I have no doubt that that's the case. In any government enterprise, I think that's true. So the question is, what are the tools that we can give workers to make those calls, but providing them with as much context as possible is really important.
Comment, Martin. No. Next question.
Hello. I don't know anything about this topic at all. So this is very genuine. Naomi, when in your opening remarks, I thought I heard that you were equating poverty to an incompetent parent. So should poor people not have children? And how would that be different than like eugenics? Yeah.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I actually didn't hear those last few words. Could you repeat the question as you understood it, Naomi?
I think you're saying that you think I said that that you think I said, but I did not say that poor people are incompetent parents in some ways. What I was saying actually was that while there is a lot of overlap in terms of people who are poor being taken into the child welfare system, what is actually driving child welfare problems, what is actually driving abuse and neglect is the drug crisis in this country. We have a situation where, because most poor people in this country don't abuse or neglect their children. And I am tired, frankly, of us throwing every poor person under the bus when we have this conversation, because they're not hitting their children. They're not leaving them at home for days at a time. They're not failing to take them to the doctor. And so the idea that this conversation has to be just about poverty, it is not true. Up to 90% of the families involved with the child welfare system have a substance use disorder. That's alcohol or drugs or both. Many of them are also suffering from a co-occurring serious mental illness. Those are things that make it very hard to allow someone to care for particularly young children. I am the mother of 3 children myself, and I can tell you that when you have an infant, even when you are perfectly sober, it is extraordinarily difficult to be patient, to take care of that child, to meet all of their needs. And then they get into what I like to call the mobile but totally irrational stage, where they are running around trying to go into traffic or touch a hot stove or jump into the bathtub or eat their siblings' Lego. And if you think that it is easy to do that while you are high or dealing with an active addiction issue, it is not. It is hard to keep those kids safe while you are not mentally fully in control of your capacities.
Comment, Martin.
I just can't grasp how you could accept what I said as true and not be beyond dismayed by it, that the federal government only pays states to take children who live in poverty. They don't pay a dime for taking anybody else's children. Unsurprisingly, they don't take my children.
If your children were taken into foster care, the foster parents would be paid as well. What are you talking about?
I guess that was your one question, Martin. I mean, you just did your.
Rhetorical question.
Excuse me. Well, excuse me. Well, Martin has the right to answer any question, rhetorical or otherwise. Do you want to answer that question? Okay. All right. Next question.
Hi, Naomi. So, when you have the opportunity to be in a room with black women such as myself, Angela Burton, Shireen White, Sharonda Selivanoff, who could have educated you and schooled you on the actual experiences of black women with this system, you chose to shut it down. Why?
Naomi.
So this is a group that I was a part of, the Bipartisan Policy Center group. It was a group that was supposed to discuss the differences between poverty and neglect. And I was a part of this group. It's a bipartisan policy center, so there were people from all different aspects of the political spectrum who were part of the group, just to give all of you some context. And the goal of the group was to, well, the goal was a little unclear from the people who were running it, but the goal of the group was essentially to sort of try to distinguish what are the factors of poverty that are separate from the factors of neglect. And what became increasingly clear during our conversations is that there were some people in the group, although I would say maybe like 2 out of the 10 members of the group, who believed really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's just no such thing as neglect. I mean, that is that poverty really explains all aspects of child welfare problems that are not physical abuse, and maybe poverty even explains physical abuse. Because, by the way, there are folks out there who believe that if you're impoverished, you should be excused from, hitting your kids or beating your kids because you're stressed. So anyway, I said we had probably meetings for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months to discuss this issue. And I finally said, you guys can continue with this group, but I'm not going to continue with it because I think the premise of the group was to distinguish between poverty and neglect. And if there are people in the group who don't think neglect exists, this seems like a conversation that's not going anywhere.
Coming from you, Martin. Please, miss. Martin.
Okay, no, I'll just speak about
Okay. All right, go to the mic. Go to the mic. Please go to the mic. Okay. Okay, all right.
Who said that? You said that? You told her to go to the mic. Go ahead.
All right.
She said I could correct her if she's wrong. She's wrong.
Okay.
She's misrepresenting the position that not just 2 people, but numerous people took within that group. And she took offense at the fact that some of us would not subscribe to a litmus test that CPS is an essential aspect of responding to children and families in crisis. And that is why you shut it down.
Okay. Martin, do you want to comment on the question? No.
I just have a quick
Yes,
statement.
go ahead. Next question.
When you care about a child's well-being, you don't just care about what you claim they're going through at home. You should also care about what happens to them if they're taken out of the home and the outcomes. And in America, the worst outcomes happen to children who enter the foster system. So I like to end my statement with, if foster care was a good thing, black kids would only get into affirmative action.
I think I heard a question there somewhere, Naomi. Would you like to respond?
What was the question?
What about not just what happens in the home, but what happens in the foster care?
I spend a lot of time researching, traveling, interviewing people to find out what the best ways are that we can recruit and retain quality foster parents. So I absolutely care about what happens after kids are removed from their home.
And what's your opinion of it?
What's my
How good is what's the quality of the foster care?
Well, I think there's one big theme that's running through tonight is the difficulty people have of distinguishing correlation and causation. So just because families who are in poverty are more likely to be in foster care doesn't mean that poverty causes foster care. Just because kids who are in foster care have bad outcomes doesn't mean that foster care caused bad outcomes. So I know this is something that's not taught as much in college these days, but it's a really important distinction. Kids who are taken into foster care have experienced years of abuse and neglect. Before they go into the foster care system. It would be really surprising if a child who had been taken into foster care had better outcomes than a child who was never abused or neglected and not taken into foster care.
Comment from you, Martin? Okay.
Ms. Schaefer
That's good because we got a lot of people lined up.
Ms.
Go ahead.
Schaefer Riley, your argument lacks the alarming findings from the May 2024 report of the New York Advisory Committee on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, examining the New York child welfare system and its impact on Black children and families. The report referenced many of the statistics quoted by your opponent. It found that New York's child welfare system prioritizes cultural practice, often embodied in white families, over cultural practice, often embodied in Black families, without assessing for objective standards regarding appropriate care for children. So as a white woman who wants to speak on Black families, did you review or even consider this report? And how are you writing a prescription for more government policing to Black families, knowing that there is a finding that Black family cultural practices are not even considered in CPS care and assessment?
I guess you heard your question, Naomi?
I testified before the New York Advisory Committee. It was funny because, this nice woman has a sweatshirt, but when you're doing Zoom, it's not the sweatshirt. It's like people, just have like the fun emojis that go floating through. So people have lots of angry emojis instead of fun sweatshirt. What does the sweatshirt say? I couldn't.
The caucasity.
What?
The caucasity, your whiteness.
The caucasity. Wow.
Hey, please address the question.
I'm sorry. So the question is, why don't I?
Did you review and consider this report, and how are you writing a prescription for more government policing?
So actually my concern, as I keep saying in this debate, because it's supposed to be about the child protective services. Yeah, so what I keep coming back to is the question of how to protect Black children from being killed, and this report doesn't really do a lot to answer that. That's my answer. That's my answer. You want to? I've read the report. I found it insufficient to answering the question of how to protect Black children from being killed.
Thank you. That wasn't the question.
Okay. Well, all right. The question. That's the end of it. Martin, comment from you? No. Okay. Oh, next question.
Maybe. Hi. Oh, it's working. Okay. Hi, this is for Martin. So, Martin, you brought up some really astute points, right, about how our systems need to drastically evolve to enable parents to actually be the best parents they can be. Their health is critical for that, right? Agree with you on that. I guess I'm just thinking, though, of certain friends of mine from more affluent white communities who've suffered through alcoholic parents or parents that took fentanyl. They suffered through a huge amount of psychological and physical abuse. And even in my own building, just upstairs, there's a family who like regularly beats their kids, very young kids. And sometimes I intervene, but I also sometimes ask myself, if I intervene, if I call anyone, I also don't want to destroy the family. So I'm wondering, the question for you here is there something in between where Child Protective Services and the foster system, or something in between, I guess, my just sitting there and having to hear this and hearing these kids abused versus my thinking, I don't want to split this family apart? Is there something that can be done about this?
There are children that should be removed from their families. There are children that should be removed from their families. And there are children who live in privileged communities who should be removed from their families. But once we appreciate that we are a world outlier, that we destroy families at a rate that no other country would consider, we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what's wrong with us? This isn't a theoretical question. Should all children be forced to endure the circumstances of their birth at home? No. Children have a human right to be raised safely. We have a duty to enforce that right in a manner that we aren't close to doing today. And I'm not against removing children. I'm against the way we do it.
Comment, Naomi?
I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the rhetoric that is being used is such that it makes someone like you, who is genuinely concerned about these children being beaten, reluctant to call anyone about this. I mean, that's horrifying. And so I understand that there are concerns about CPS making the wrong decisions, but the idea that you are sitting there, and by the way, there have been questions, like I read these advice columns all the time where people are asking similar questions, and their main fear is like the worst possible thing that could ever happen to these kids would be being placed in foster care. That might not be the worst possible thing that would happen to these kids. The worst possible thing might be being one of those 2,000 fatalities a year, or maybe being beaten so much that they might as well be one of those 2,000 fatalities a year. So I guess for me, the rhetoric that is coming out of my opponent and some of the other people in this room makes me concerned that people with genuine concern about the welfare of children are reluctant to pick up the phone and call when children are clearly in danger.
Next question.
Okay. First of all, thank you for debating this topic. That is hard, even if your viewpoint is not favorable. But I have a lot of questions, but I think I have one, right? I can only ask one?
One question per person.
Okay, so going into the facts, this question is for Naomi, into the facts of your book, which I had the pleasure of listening to, you claim that you did not devote your life to child welfare. You go into statistics about how women or children that leave foster care, especially women, are on welfare, public assistance, they have mental disorders, and then you go into later chapters where you talk about the men who become domestically abusive. So according to your book that you have written, why would you think that more oversight into removing children would be helpful if they're coming out worse than they're going in? Meaning if they're coming out being domestically abusive, which creates more problems, or if they're coming out being mentally, off by leaving for the foster care system, does it make sense to add more people in their home to remove them?
Could you summarize the question as you understand and then answer it?
I don't think I wrote those things that you're saying, so maybe there's a misunderstanding. As I keep saying.
I'm sorry, I wrote the notes. So in your book you said, and I'm gonna quote, exact quote, you said, foster children who reach adulthood with no family connection have a difficult road ahead. By their mid-20s, nearly 70% of the women are on public assistance, more likely to be homeless, to be unemployed, and to be involved in drugs.
Yes.
So you wrote that.
Right, so those are, okay, so those are kids who have aged out of the foster care system. So, are you asking the question, or is this nice lady here asking it?
Please, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, again, I want to go back for 1 second just to the correlation causation problem here, which is there are folks who are aging out of the foster care system and they are having bad outcomes. That doesn't mean that the foster care system is responsible for the bad outcomes. I don't know how to answer this question any other way. I don't think that foster care, one of the studies that I cited in my opening statement, I think is really striking, because what it does is it looks at kids who either we could make two decisions about these kids. These are kids who are on the border. They're kids who Martin would say we should leave in their homes, and one caseworker might say leave them in their homes, and another caseworker might say we should take them out. They're on the border. There's significantly serious things going on in the home, but we have to make a decision. Do we provide this family with supportive services, or do we remove them? And what this study found is that for those kids on the border where we're making this decision, if we make the decision to place them in foster care, their outcomes are better. Significantly better. They are less likely to suffer maltreatment at the hands of their parents after they are reunited with those parents. Those parents apparently see foster care as a wake-up call. They engage, after their kids are taken into foster care, they engage in less criminal activity. And once their kids are put back, these are kids who are being reunited with their families. Those kids have better long-term outcomes in terms of education, in terms of their own likelihood of being incarcerated later. So I just want people to understand that I know the premise here, everybody thinks foster care is the worst possible thing for kids. There are kids who need to be removed, as my opponent just pointed out, and for some of those kids, their lives will actually be better as a result of having been removed because their parents will clean up their acts.
Comment, Martin? You got to do it into a mic. Yeah.
A recent study in Sweden followed children in more than 21,000 cases of abuse and neglect allegations. Part went to foster care, others stayed at home. It found that by age 20, the foster children were more than 4 times more likely to have died than the children allowed to stay with their families. A Canadian study concluded that foster care worsened children's health and legal system outcomes, and foster care is as risky or more as leaving a child at home. Kevin Ryan reported for a federal lawsuit a few years ago about the girl who committed suicide while in the Texas system after the guards in her place forbid children from making phone calls after 6 p.m., and she went and hanged herself. If you think that giving children over to state officials to raise them is a smart idea, I don't think you're a parent.
Next question.
Yes. First, I wanted to clarify that, Ms. Riley, you were correct that all children all foster parents receive payments for caring for the children. They receive them from state and local governments. They receive a lot more than parents who are on welfare receive. But the federal government reimburses part of those, but only reimburses the children who were poor. But my question is that 55 years ago when this system started, there was very little spending on child welfare. And 2,000 children were killed every year from abuse and neglect. We now spend $34 billion on the child welfare system, and there are still 2,000 children killed every year. So why do you think that having more intervention by caseworkers who you think are incompetent is going to help children.
Question for you, Naomi.
I don't believe I ever said I think all caseworkers are incompetent. So we should clarify that first of all. But in terms of the question of how much money we're spending, a lot of the money that we are spending is not going to pay foster parents of anyone. It's going to a lot of the extra services that we are trying to offer parents. Now, people in this room may find those services silly, and I think plenty of them are ineffective, frankly, but that doesn't mean that we're not spending a lot of money on them.
Comment, Martin?
Just to follow up on David, I'm surprised you didn't know that the federal government doesn't pay the state for removing children from wealthy families. They don't.
You said no one is paying them.
I said the federal government.
Well, before you said no one is paying.
Well, I don't think so, ma'am.
Okay, next question.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. So it's important, names are important. So my name is Tanisha Grant, and I'm the data right here in front of you. And my story is I was separated from my family at birth. I now have mental illnesses that I have to deal with because I never got to root with my family. So I'm the people that you talk about. So my question is, because we know in our history we have a long line of privileged white women who have been proven wrong. So my question is, what qualifies you to talk about black families when you have never been a black woman, a black parent, or a black child? And that comes from someone who was separated at birth, was sex trafficked, raped by foster care workers, all those good things. And my education comes from my knowledge. So what do you say to that, Naomi?
I guess there's a question there. Naomi?
I'm waving to my black son. Do you all want to wave to him now? Go for it. Oh, my God. Okay. All right, listen.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Okay, well, excuse me.
So
Excuse me.
ridiculous.
We have established,
Okay, listen.
moderators, we've established the fact that Naomi is not black. Would you take it from there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we've also established Martin is not black, but he gets to talk. I don't understand why the double So it actually doesn't have anything to do with my skin color. If you liked what I was saying, that's fine. If you don't like what I'm saying, it's fine. What does it have to do with the fact that I'm not black?
Okay.
He's not black. Gene's not black. I don't understand. It doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm a journalist. I'm a
Okay,
journalist.
oh, please,
I'm a
please.
journalist. I'm a
Please,
researcher.
please again.
I write articles.
Okay,
I
look-
write.
You're invited to our after party, and
I just-
you're entitled. You were invited to the after party.
I really do have an objection to this. Like this claim that I don't get to talk because I'm not black.
Okay, yeah. Martin, you're not black either. Do you have anything to say? Okay. All right. All right.
No, I have to say, Martin, I actually find this a little offensive that the fact that you wouldn't stick up for the idea that I can't have an opinion on this even though I'm not black. Do you not think that, no, this is an important question.
It's not that you can't stand up for the idea. We disagree with what you say.
That's right. So that's fine. That is legitimate, but I wish you would say that I am allowed to say these things and that the fact that I'm not black should have nothing to do with this. You're a university professor. You believe in free speech. You believe that people can have informed opinions about things. Why can't I?
All right. You are allowed to say these things, and I'm chagrined that you do.
Okay. Three white people on the stage. What can we do? Two of them Jewish. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi. Oh, okay. All right, well, thank you. Hi, so I came into this debate, pretty sure I was going to agree with Martin, but I think, Naomi, you've won me over. You made some really good, logical arguments. Hold on.
Is there a question in there?
There is a question here. I feel like the question of the debate tonight wasn't answered, so I would like for you to maybe give your opinion on how we can. The issue that we find ourselves with is that the welfare system isn't working well for these children. How can, because you said yourself, right, that there's this understanding that the worst thing that can happen is a child can be taken from his home. So how can maybe that be changed? And more importantly, maybe those 34, billion, I don't know, lots of money that's going into this into this CPS, how can we utilize that better, maybe cut out a lot of bureaucracy to actually improve the state of the lives of the children that are actually being taken?
Yeah.
So I unfortunately think it's very hard for money to improve some of these outcomes. We will disagree about the size of the safety net in this country. We're not here to debate Medicare or food assistance or anything like that. And since I keep saying, and nobody seems to disagree with me that much, that one of the intractable problems here is drug abuse, and we don't have a solution for addiction in this country. I mean, obviously, we could be spending more money to find solutions for addiction. I mean, I just talked to someone today about all their optimism about using GLP-1 drugs, Ozempic and whatever, which seem to be showing promise for curbing addiction. Maybe we should be throwing billions of dollars at those drugs. No, I understand. I'm just saying I don't think that throwing billions of dollars at CPS is going to improve CPS. What can we do? So I think the two pieces of government intervention that we have are, one, making sure that reports are coming in so we understand what is going on in families, particularly families of very young children, and offering them whatever support we can, services, finding out whether those children are safe, and then understanding that foster care has to be a solution for a small part of that population.
Yeah. Okay. Martin, any comment?
Yes, I want to get your vote back. There's really no doubt any longer that we can reduce the number of children removed from their families without increasing their danger. There's just no doubt about that any longer. It was proven in Los Angeles, which shrunk its foster care population by 46% with no increase in fatalities or hospitalizations. They did it by shrinking the definition of a reportable maltreatment claim. They narrowed the definition of neglect, and they prohibited removing children due to poverty or homelessness. New York did the same thing. In 2014, 11,700 children were in foster care, 4,500 new entries. Deaths were 58, and deaths due to homicide, 9. 11 years later, there were 6,700 children in foster care, 2,800 new entries, and the same deaths were down to 45. Removing children does not increase their danger of dying.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we're actually, okay, now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, and therefore, may I say, each of you online asks the question, but unfortunately, that will mean then that might be responded to in the summary portions, but ask the question, and then the next person will ask the question. What is your question?
I'll hold it. This is for Mr. Guggenheim. Mr. Guggenheim, I actually flew here from New Mexico, and I actually thought we would have a more interesting debate. I thought it would be about government-run child protective services should intervene more in the lives of children. And so I'm actually a little disappointed in the debate. I felt like it was more of an ambush. I'm going to tell you, I am from the state that has, so I literally flew from New Mexico yesterday to listen to this debate. My question is, let me tell you the facts. New Mexico has free universal pre-K, free universal home visiting, free universal child care, free college. We have free health care. We also have the worst childhood outcomes out of every single state and the worst education. I want to talk about specifically, and I'd like to audit your class if I could do that at NYU, 22% of cases about child welfare. I feel like I get to talk. I've waited for 30 minutes.
But please ask your
Well,
question.
people are booing me and I'm not talking. So my question is about the 22% of cases that are specifically and explicitly related to abuse and physical and sexual abuse. And I'm going to read you a case out of New Mexico.
Oh, please.
Okay,
You asked your
there's
question.
a case that had, okay, let me just tell you this, because he's the law professor and I've waited for every other person in this room to talk. So last week in New Mexico, a couple right around Thanksgiving fled to Missouri after their 12-year-old daughter called to report herself for sexual abuse. So she called 911 and said, "My father is raping me." Child Protective Services came, and law enforcement said, "Foster care is bad. We're going to give mom 3 days notice to get dad out of the house." Guess what happened in 3 days? They fled to Missouri. I know that you're telling me time. So the couple fled to Missouri, 22 cases. At this point, the dad has faced 32 felony charges. I want to know from Mr. Guggenheim, when would you, based on the
Okay, I
premise of
believe you
this
made
debate,
your point.
when would you say that Child Protective Services should intervene? What is your threshold?
Okay, excuse me. No, Martin. Okay, next question, please. Unfortunately, that has to be. Forgive me. We have run out of time for the questions. But you asked a question. Martin can respond to that during the summary portion. Next question.
Thank you. This is for Ms. Riley. As Mr. Guggenheim said, the way that federal funding is currently situated allows special funding streams for children who are placed in foster care. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that monthly payments made to foster parents are higher than the cash payments that are available to birth parents through regular welfare avenues. As far as I'm aware, there's not a practice of providing families involved in the family regulation system with direct cash payments like those that foster parents receive. With that said, I would ask why you think that it is productive to give direct cash payments to foster parents, but that in the case of birth parents, that money should only be spent on monitoring or assigned services that do nothing to alleviate their financial struggles. That is, when so many aspects of neglect can be attributed to insufficient financial resources, why should the state value the needs of foster parents over the needs of birth parents?
Okay, next question. Next question, please.
Thank you. Hey, this question is for Naomi, April, Philly. In 2025, you had a white couple get sentenced to hundreds of years due to putting their 5 adopted children and treating them as slaves. But we also have in foster care examples of the Hart family that drove their children off the bridge and so forth and so on. In my community alone, I know 4 families whose children have died in foster care by the resource parents. So part of that number with the 2,000 that you keep references also includes the deaths that happens due to the agency neglect of families, due to the agency putting children in bad foster homes. What can you do if you have to investigate yourself? So what would happen to those children? Because part of those 2,000 families who lost children, part of those children was in foster care. So how would you alleviate that if you're saying in order for us to alleviate the situation, it calls for more families to be surveilled when we're not surveilling foster families in the same way?
All right, thank you. The final question. You want to ask a question, miss? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you have to hold the mic?
Yeah. He's a gentleman. He'll hold it for
Naomi, you are a journalist. I don't know you to be a social scientist that does research. However, my question to you is I would like to know what is your understanding of intersectionality when it comes to child welfare, because you continue to focus on Child Protective Services and at the same time you don't address how it intersects with everything else, with education, with criminal justice, with substance abuse and mental health, which you seem to focus a lot on. So if you could tell me, as a journalist, what is your understanding of child welfare
in relation to the intersectionality with all of these things that you are not talking about that has to do with neglect.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, we now go to the summary portion of the evening. Martin, you did take that extra minute that other time, so I will give Naomi 6 minutes of summary. The affirmative goes first on the summary. Naomi, you can take the podium if you'd like. 6 minutes of summary from Naomi, and you may want to address some of the questions that were put to you.
Okay. All right. Well, there are a lot of questions that were there at the end, so I'm going to try to get through them. I think the intersectionality question is really interesting because, as I mentioned in my opening, there are a lot of very important risk factors for Black children. They are suffering as a result of a whole host of other problems. And like I said, Child Protective Services is kind of the last resort. It's the ambulance. So Black families might have worse educational outcomes. They might be disproportionately poor. They might be disproportionately suffering in some cases from substance use disorders. They might be disproportionately suffering from maternal mortality problems, from preterm birth. All of these things which are risk factors for Black children and which are risk factors for maltreatment. And so the question is, my opponent mentioned earlier lead paint, which I think is an interesting analogy here. If we went around New York City and we said, okay, everyone who is dealing with lead paint in their apartment, please come to this office. We are going to take your names down and we are going to make sure that we engage in an abatement program for the lead paint. And then at the end of the day, we looked at the list and we said, man, we have a disproportionate number of Black families on this list. We should cross some of them off because we want the numbers on our list to come out even. They should match proportionately the population of New York City. And you would say, that's crazy. We should do lead abatement where lead abatement is needed. Now, I think we should send CPS to where CPS is needed. And if we're getting more reports of abuse and neglect from Black families, we should be sending CPS to see those families. And if we're seeing a disproportionate number of Black children dying, 3 times the rate of white children, Black children dying of maltreatment than white families, then we should be intervening more in those families to make sure those children are protected. There are not many things that government does well, but even those of us who believe in the principles of small government understand that one of government's core functions is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We need police departments and we need child protective services. We have an imperfect child welfare system and there is much we can do to improve it. Among other things, we can ensure that the system is focused on protecting children rather than family well-being or all of these other things, which I think are the jobs of other systems. Child Protective Services should be focused on protecting children who are in danger. You would never know it to listen to our elites talk, including the ones in this room. But there's actually broad agreement among the American people about what constitutes risk to children. And this is broad agreement across racial groups and across class lines. A recent survey found that more than 80% of Americans want authorities to investigate when a newborn shows signs of substance exposure during pregnancy. So the question is, 80% of Americans agree on almost nothing right now. Why do they agree on that? Americans seem to understand that very young children have little means of protecting themselves from parents who are unwilling or unable to care for them. And they understand that substance use by parents of young children is a significant cause for concern. And that is when the authorities must step in. If we are to judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable, then ignoring drug use by parents of infants is a pretty severe indictment in my view. How bad is this problem? In West Virginia, between 2020 and 2022, 1 in 8 babies was born substance exposed. A hospital in New Mexico near 3 Indian reservations recently found that 80% of infants were born substance exposed, and those are the only the ones who get tested. How can we protect these children if we are not monitoring what happens when they go home? It is hard for us to imagine good outcomes in these cases, but parents can and do clean up their acts. When we look at the data, even kids who are in foster care agree that it is often a necessary intervention. A 2022 study interviewed 200 pre-adolescents about their experience in foster care and then interviewed them again 10 years later. What did they think? At both ages, over 80% of participants reported that it was somewhat or very helpful to be placed in foster care. And another large-scale study found that almost 2/3 of kids who were placed in foster care said they were, quote, lucky to have been placed. It is easy for those of us who grow up in safe and loving homes to say things like children belong with their families no matter what. But before you dismiss government intervention as needless family surveillance or separation, imagine what kind of home you have to have grown up in to say that you were lucky to have been removed. As I finish up tonight, I invite you to keep 11-year-old Jacob Pritchett in your thoughts. This nonverbal autistic child, who is the size of a 7-year-old, has been missing for months. Jacob was the subject of reports to ACS as early as 2017. He has never been enrolled in school. Neighbors said they would find him alone in a stroller in the lobby of his Bronx building. They would hear his mother screaming at him at the top of her lungs. But when police arrived at his mother's door in October, she told them she'd never had a child. The government should have intervened more in the life of Jacob and the lives of so many others who cannot protect themselves. Thank you.
Martin, 5 minutes of summary. Take it away, Martin.
So I'm very disappointed to learn that the libertarian-leaning audience was displeased with my remarks and thinks that in the one area, despite all of the damage that state officials deliberately inflict on the communities that are ravaged by this system, that you're still of the view we ought to be doing it more. My task is a little too easy tonight because a blockbuster study came out just yesterday by the American Medical Association that answers the question through science. And I feel a bit sorry for the timing of it, but after analyzing 3.4 million records in state-supervised care from 2010 to 2023, reviewing 24,000 child fatalities attributed to child abuse, they found no evidence that increasing foster care placement reduces death. And to be super sure, they looked for underreporting. They doubled the estimate of actual deaths. No evidence that removing children. New York has shown that. Through a vibrant family defense community, we have drastically reduced the number of children separated from their families. There were 50,000 children in foster care. When I worked in this system 40 years ago, there are 6,000 today. The number of deaths in New York has not gone up. That's how I answer the question to you guys. But I want to go further than that. I don't want to win that easy question. I want to demand that child welfare become grounded on a deep commitment to equality. Children have a human right to equal access to education, housing, medical care, safe streets, parks, and more. You think that's outside of this? It's not. It's at its center. Just as the Supreme Court announced Brown v. Board of Education so that the Soviets could not continue to call us racists. We have the child welfare system of all welfare systems to hide our unwillingness to give children born into poverty an even chance to grow and thrive. I want to live in a country that's committed to child well-being. I do not. Imagine for a moment we could achieve the goal of convincing all Americans to take responsibility for all children living here. In such a world, two consequences would be readily apparent. First, we would find ways to make substantial improvements to the quality of life of poor minority children and to ameliorate most of the currently unacceptable conditions they experience. They would receive better health care. They would live in safer communities, in cleaner communities. Their families would be treated with dignity and respect. That alone would take care of our problem. But once Americans started loving other people's children as their own, once they did that, they would find repugnant and abhorrent a systematic strategy of taking children from their families, permanently banishing their birth relatives. We need to stop doing what we've been doing for 50 years. We ought to start listening. We ought to treat the community that we're talking about with respect. We ought to start believing that they want their children to thrive more than we do. We would learn if we listened. What the mothers, fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, sisters, neighbors living in the zip codes that feed this system, that they are unhappier with the conditions of their lives than my opponent. We give them what they don't want. We don't give them what they need. I'm going to end on that note.
Thank you. Okay. Lucas, please open the voting. Yes, no, or undecided. Government-run child protective services should intervene more in the lives of children. Yes, no, or undecided for the final vote. I actually forgot to bring the Tootsie Roll that I give to the winner, but happily, both sides are coming to the reception afterwards. That's part of the second mission of the Soho Forum, to get people together, to build a community of people who want to discuss issues of importance. Both debaters are coming to the party. That's at 55 Great Jones Street. Weirdly, that is 3rd Street. We're a couple of blocks downtown from 3rd Street. 3rd Street off Bowery, which is 3rd Avenue. A number of people, including me, know where that is because that's the loft apartment I share with my wife, Asako, who has catered that party. So you're all invited to come and to talk to the debaters, talk to each other, enjoy the food and drink, and celebrate a sense of community among people who have given me the liveliest debate I've ever hosted at the Soho Forum. So I thank you for that. That's what I live for. And also, I want to announce that there's more to come from the Soho Forum. In late January, that's on January 27th, we're going to be debating a very different issue, artificial intelligence. The affirmative is going to defend the resolution that artificial intelligence will bring great net benefits to most people. That's in late January, and January 27th. Tickets are on sale for that. We're going to be shut out of the Sheen Center through the month of February, but on March 4th, we're going to have a debate on the merits of the National Institutes of Health, and we're pleased to report that one of our debaters will be a former dean of Harvard Medical School, Jeffrey Fleer. That will be on March 4th. We are also working very hard to have a debate about the merits of the Mamdani administration after his first 100 days in office. That will be in April. We're still working on that. That will be planned. So we hope to see you back again at the Soho Forum. And Lucas, where do we stand with the vote? Okay? Drum roll, please. It's not much of a drum roll. Okay. All right. The yes vote was at 10.9%. It went up to 26.5%. It picked up 15.7 points. 15.7 points. That's the number to beat. The no vote went from 58% to 68%. It picked up 10.2 points. So there's a 5-point gap. The Tootsie Roll goes to the yes vote. Congratulations, Naomi. Congratulations to Martin. And again, 55 Great Jones Street. Follow the cripple, that's me, up to 55 Great Jones Street. Thank you to both debaters for a lively evening. See you at the party.